So time to add a sign up page. For that here under pages, I will add a new subfolder auth and in there add the user auth.view file, which will hold our user authentication form. And as I just said it, in here I want to have a form, a very simple form, where we maybe have a div with a class of form control. And then inside of that div, we have a label for the email field where we say email. And below that, we have an input of type email where the user should enter his or her email address. So I have an ID of email here. And then we can copy that to do the same for the password. So here we have type password, ID password, and we say password on the label. And below that, we have the base button where we say log in. And the caption of this button should change depending whether we want to log in or not, because I'll add a second button here where I set the type to button so that this button won't submit the surrounding form, where I say sign up instead, and where I set the mode to flat. This will ensure that this allows us to switch between signing up and logging in. Now for some styling, I think we can reuse the styling we find on another page, the contact coach page. Here we can grab the styling defined here. I don't grab the errors and don't grab the actions because I'm not using this here. And simply add styling to this component now. And yes, we could try to set this up as general app-wide styling or create separate components that hold inputs, but I will just copy those styles here and repeat the styling code a little bit. And one thing I forgot, I also want to put all of that into a base card component here for some nice styling. Okay, now that's the basic user auth page. Let's now bring it to the screen so that we can fine-tune it. And it should be loaded as a route. So in the router.js file, we can register a new route, maybe here, right before our catch-all route, which is /auth, let's say, where the component is this newly added component. So we import user auth from /pages/auth user auth.view. That's the component we just added here. And now user auth is the component that should be loaded when we visit /auth. So with that added, if we now enter /auth, and of course we'll soon add navigation options to get there, this is this component. Now one thing I want to change here in the styling, the form shouldn't have this border, doesn't need the border radius. We can get rid of that. Now this looks better. And actually, I will also swap this and move the form into the base card and not the other way around. Yeah, this now looks better. So now we got this form. This button will submit the form. This button will later help us switch between signing up and logging in, because of course this form should be able to handle both. And speaking of that, let's maybe continue with this form right away. And let's make sure that we do gather some user data and that we do send this to Firebase thereafter. So for that, back in the user auth component, we of course need a script. And we got some data we want to manage here because, for example, we want to manage the user input. That will be an email address and that will be a password. Now you can also add more complex validation, as we did it in the coach registration component, in the coach form to be precise. You could do this here in user auth, but we practiced this before. Here I want to focus just on authentication, so I will only add very basic validation here. For example, I will add a form is valid key, which initially is true, and we'll set that to false if the user submits the form and email or password should be invalid. We also need to be able to switch between sign up and log in mode, because that will change which action will be dispatched later, which HTTP request should be sent. So therefore, I will also add a mode data property here and set this to log in initially, but this can also be sign up once we added the logic. And that's the next thing. Let's add some methods. Submit form is one method. Switch auth mode is another method. Submit form, well, you guess it, should be triggered when the form is submitted. Switch auth mode should be triggered when this switch button here is clicked. So we can already wire this up. Wire up this second button and point at switch auth mode. And on the form, add the submit event handler with the prevent modifier and point at submit form. Also, connect the inputs with vModel and connect this one to email and the second one to password. With that done, we can start with submit form and check if this email is empty. And actually, therefore, I want to use the trim modifier again to trim any excess white space. So check if email is then empty. Or if not, this email includes an @ symbol, which is a very trivial validation of whether we have an email address or not. Or if this password length is smaller than 6 characters, I think that's the minimum Firebase actually wants. If any of these conditions is met, then we set form is valid to false and we return so that no other code executes. And we set form is valid to true initially when the form is submitted to clear any errors we might be displaying. Because we can now use form is valid to show an error message, maybe here in a paragraph with vif, check if form is valid, or if it's not valid, to be precise, and then show a message of please enter a valid email and password must be at least 6 characters long. So now we got this as well. And that's the basic validation I want to do here. Now, if we make it past this if check, we will then send an appropriate HTTP request for logging in or signing up, but that will be the next step. First, let's work on the auth mode. And here I want to check if this mode is equal to login. So if we are currently in login mode, in that case, I'll set mode to sign up. Else, if we are in sign up, I'll set mode to log in. And now we can use this mode data property to control what's displayed on the button here as a caption, but then also to later change which kind of HTTP request is sent here. Now, to change the button captions, I will use computed properties to keep that logic in the script here. And here I'll have the submit button caption and the switch mode button caption computed property. And on the submit button, I want to check if this mode is equal to login. And if that's the case, I'll return a caption of login. Else, we are in sign up mode, I will say sign up. And for the switch mode button, I'll basically do the same. I will also check in which mode we are. And if we are in login mode, I'll say sign up instead, because that's the new mode this button should toggle. If we are in sign up mode, I'll say login instead. And now we can use these computed properties here. So here on the submit button, I output my submit button caption with interpolation. And here on the switch button, I output my switch mode button caption. Okay. Now we can click the switch button and we switch between those modes. But at the moment, this of course only affects what we see on the screen. But that's better than nothing. Now, as a next step, we need to really get that user input and then send that data to Firebase to exchange it for a token or to create a new user to start with.